Okay, welcome back everybody to part 2 of this series of videos talking about how to bring in some 3D animation or models or something like that into your footage. We're in Premiere, and if you haven't seen the first tutorial, I'll do a little introduction, then check that out. I'll link it below. So, in the welcome screen of Premiere, I'm just simply going to click on my Tech Tutorials entry here. You can click on whatever one you made, and we're going to get into the project. And so this is left off exactly where we left it off, where I had brought in this video that we're actually going to make, one of many if enough tutorials go through. And we're just going to close this. We don't need this. This is the end product. We want to start with what we want to make. So back into Explorer we go, and my original file is here. And I've placed it in a folder that's going to make sense to me later, and doesn't matter where it's coming from though, so don't sweat it. Just as long as it kind of stays there, or Premiere will be able to find it again later, because it doesn't copy anything anywhere, it just references it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to drag this into the project, and move that out of the way. And so now that we're in here, Premiere, we're going to be in here for a little bit here. We're going to talk about, here's a strange bug of Premiere, eh? There's nothing in here, but when you do this, it brings back this thumbnail. They haven't fixed that for so long. Anyhow, so let's double click this bit here, and we've got it's 59.94 frames per second, 1080p video. And if we scroll through, we can see that it's me working with a horse. And when we're thinking about tracking, because what we want to do, actually, let's open this back up here. When we're thinking about tracking, and this is the mute button. If you don't want audio, I'm just clicking this for mute. Not important. We want to find a shot, like for your first shot, for the first thing that you're ever going to do. You want to find something that's easy to track. So here's some minor, almost like a dolly move. A dolly move is where you go forwards or backwards or sideways, and you're just going straight. I'm just stepping backwards. But it's not a zoom, and it's not a pan, it's not a tilt. It's almost just a dolly, and so we're dollying backwards, and then sort of standing relatively still. Still a handheld shot, so there is some movement, and so our character has to stay in spot while we do this. But when we think about tracking, beginning tracking and understanding how tracking works, start with something really easy. In fact, you wouldn't even, if you want to get more practice, the very, very basics, then you might not even have this bit of movement here. You might just have this handheld shot, which provides, some tracking requirements. You can't just place a character in a scene like this and expect it to look accurate, because there is minor movement. If we open this up a bit bigger, you should be able to see as we scroll through here, there is just a little bit of movement going on. If you look on sort of the edges or something like that, rather than, don't look at the character, but look at the edges or something, and you can see that there's a little bit of movement to the camera. It's a handheld shot. So there's a little bit of a hand. So that could be enough. But what I wanted to do is I wanted my character to be mostly out of frame before I started. So, and the other thing that you want to keep in mind for your first shot is something small like this, but to make sure that you can have a pile of trackable points throughout the whole shot. That will make things much, much easier. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to find this point. So we're going to go over to our source, and or we could find any point. We could actually just do something totally different. And we're looking for about 10 seconds worth of footage. And we could do something new. We don't have to do that shot. We don't want to. But there's a lot of movement. I do a lot of walking around when I'm with horses until they stop moving. So I think we're coming up on the spot that I might have taken. Yeah, this is it. So here we're going to want to get our clip. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the arrow keys And you can press shift with the arrow key and it'll go 10 seconds at a time, or 5 or 10 seconds. Let's see. Frames, sorry. And I want to get something that's going to be, let's play that. See how that looks.
Very cautious. I have a feeling he's just one of those cautious types.
So that's a pretty good set of time.
I'm going to switch camera.
And I'm going to hit O for out. So that's going to be the end of my clip. I'll come this way. And we want to get him looking at me. Let's go a little bit forward. So I'm just holding the arrow key to get something a little more precise. Because we want him, the other thing that was important, so I'm going to hit I and see how long our clip is. So it's 12 seconds. But the other thing we want, and it's kind of amusing, is how he's looking at me and then he looks over as if there's something there.
I have a feeling he's just one of those cautious types.
We're going to use this clip. It's 12 seconds and 12 frames.
I'm going to switch cameras.
Half a second long. This 29 point, or it's going to be a 29.97 comp or sequence. So about half a second. So 12 and a half seconds. And so in and out, or you can click these little mark in and mark out, because we only want a bit of this clip. So let's go ahead and close up that sequence there, make a little space here. And once you've got your clip, because it's the only reason we're doing this, the only reason we're using Premiere right now, is because it makes it easy to, or video editing software. You can do it in Blender, but I find it clunky. So any video editing software, we just want to get the clip that we need. So here it is in here, we drag it into the source, we find our in and out, just dragging around. You can hit these buttons, or you can hit I for in and O for out. Take this, drag it into the sequence or the timeline area here, which will make a brand new sequence right here. So we're going to call this track. And that will be good. It'll make sense so we know the sequence that we're thinking about. Because when you get a bunch of stuff in here, you're going to want to know what's what. So now that we've got this, if we want to do any color correction, we could do it, but I prefer to wait until the very end. Okay, so there's our clip. Next thing we want to do is hit Control M, as in Mary, and that will bring up a render. And actually, I should note, let's close that for a second. If you have this area highlighted, or this area highlighted, or this area highlighted, or anything, and you hit Control M, it does nothing. Don't know why. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but you have to have the timeline. So little tips, little things that you kind of discover, like, hey, Control M isn't working. Shortcut keys are fantastic. Use them when you can. Control M brings up the render or export settings panel. So here again, we can check out the ins and outs, and that's fine. By default, it just says source range, sequence, in and out. So generally, you don't have to worry about any of it, what's going on over here. What we do want to worry about is what we're exporting out to. And for this project, we're going to output down in the bottom. It says, you can't see it, unfortunately. It's on the screen because it's so long. But YouTube 1080p full HD. Now, it really depends on what your source footage is. My source happens to be, as you can see here, 1920 by 1080. So 1080p, 60 frames per second. And YouTube 1080p full HD does a pretty good job of messing around with all these settings in here. So don't worry about any of this. The only thing that I'm going to get worried or change, I'm going to worry about, is the frame rate, which I'm going to set to 29.97 because I don't need 60 frames per second. I just happen to take everything in 60 frames per second in case I want to slow it down. So in your case, it'll probably be 29.97, or you've taken something with your phone. It's going to be some odd 30.15 or something, but change the frame rate to 29.97, make it something consistent, so a constant frame rate. So that's a whole topic. But so we're going to call this track, and we're going to output it into my tech tutorials, Premiere, tutorial 2, and we'll call this track for now. So we know that we want to track this piece. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in here. So this is our track. So save that. And that's about it. There really isn't much to get too concerned about in here. Once you've hit the preset, it's going to say custom because we changed the frame rate, but it is the YouTube 1080p. And we're simply going to hit export. It's that simple. So don't worry about any of these. There's nothing, we don't need anything for the track. So let's export this. And it shouldn't take very long at all. It's a very short clip. 12 seconds is nothing. YouTube or Premiere lets you know that it's exported, and we're all done with Premiere now. We don't need this anymore. We're going to move into Blender in the next tutorial with our clip. So that's about it. If there's any questions, let me know anytime. See, I told you we didn't need to do any of this. We don't need to use any tools. We don't have to mess with any of these controls. So far, we're using Premiere for its most basic purpose, which is really just to extract a clip from a video file, which is this long one here. And that's it. Let's move into Blender in the next tutorial.